What's up, everyone? This is Aaron from Studio 3B. Listen, I wanted to dive into some background on my Java experience. I'd say I'd have, since 1998, been in the programming field, whether I'm, programming or designing software of some sort. And I'd say about 10 out of the 20 plus years in this software industry, I've spent coding in the Java language. Some people do say that Java might be going out, becoming a dead language at some point, and there may be a case for that. I just wanted to share some of this knowledge, and I'm going to start with some very basic Java stuff. During this time, if I get views and comments on a certain topic, I can definitely steer the course in that direction, but until I get the traction needed, I'm just going to start talking about Java and just going off in a direction that I choose. I'll try to be as useful as I can with my information. If you find any of this information useful or helpful to you, leave a comment below and subscribe to my channel. And I will be sure to look at the comments and steer future tutorials and videos in those directions. So please be a part of this. So getting started, there's some basics to know about programming, and I'm hoping that there's some things you've already learned about programming. And I'm going to assume you have some sort of fundamental knowledge about what variables are and all that. So I'm going to start with how do you get started actually coding in this language? Well, the first thing you need is an editor. Some people can get away with programming Java purely command line, purely in a text editor. Those people are the outliers, and I don't think too many people can get real work done in just a simple text editor. There's not a lot of syntax checking, not a lot of things where it like points out your errors. So people rely on things called IDEs, and IDEs are an environment that you can work in that will actually tell you where your code is broken, actually help you complete syntax, and it'll help you compile and run your program. It'll do more than just be a text editor for you. It'll have access to all the libraries that you need. It will at least let you download these libraries. So we can get into that for things like Maven and all these great technologies. We can get into all that too in the future. So the IDE I'm going to choose to give this tutorial is Eclipse. And let's go find Eclipse, okay? Eclipse, I think it's eclipse.org. Let's go to Eclipse IDE. Desktop and Web IDE. There's probably a couple different options to download. Let's see what we got. All right. So you can see I'm doing this in the spring of 2020. Happy quarantine, everyone. Okay, so I'm just going to download this, and I'm on a Mac, so I'll do everything on a Mac for you guys, make your lives a little bit better. So you download this. Now, just a little hint, I already have this installed, but I'm just going to install this for your sake and possibly to get the upgrade. Now, if this goes a little too slow for you guys, please let me know. Comment below, say you want more information, you want to move along a little faster. If I'm going too fast, please slow me down. Oh, by the way, Eclipse takes quite a bit of time to install. It's a very large program. It's always a good idea to crack open a cold one while you're programming. Okay, these are the other options I was telling you about. Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Eclipse IDE for enterprise Java developers. Eclipse IDE for C++ developers, and Eclipse IDE for web and JavaScript developers. Well, we could be all of these at a particular given time in life. I think I'm going to choose enterprise Java developers simply because I've only really done enterprise Java development. I've done web development, and I've done basic Java development. I've also done C++ development. Enterprise Java probably has the best libraries. Let's choose that one. And install. Oh, you need a Java 1.8 or greater installed. So you can get that from Oracle. I don't know if I'm using the Oracle one or the open source one right now, but they have Java comes with a particular license from Oracle. It's like a proprietary license. It also has an open source version that is done by an open source community. I don't know which community. Linux, perhaps. I think there are some shortcomings with the open source one, but there's less licensing requirements. You don't have to get it directly from the Oracle website. So that being said, I don't think it matters for basic Java which one you get, which version of Java you use, as long as you have 1.8 or greater. I have JDK 13.0.2 right now. All right, Eclipse is installed. Let's launch it. Okay, so it's going to ask you what your workspace is. So just go with the default workspace for now. Okay, welcome to Eclipse. You get a nice welcome page that I never really read. I just kind of close. And now, as I was saying, Java has thousands and thousands of libraries created for you out there. They do all kinds of powerful things, and anything you could possibly think of that you would want to do in code is probably already written in a library. And you might ask, where do I get all this code from? Do I have to download it? Well, yeah, you have to download it, but how would you do that? That would be a nightmare to maintain if you had to keep track of versions and what you wanted to do. So some really smart people created something called Maven. Maven is a way of managing what projects and libraries you are using in your project to as a third-party software. So it will ask you the name of the library and the version number. It also has a lot of powerful features to help you automate building of your project and creating targets. We'll say usually a jar. So let's create a Maven project. Skip archetype selection. There we go. Okay. Group ID, Studio 3B, demo. So group ID would be like your organization, and artifact would be your project. And I'm going to create a jar. That's going to be my target. Name of my project, Studio 3B demo. No parent project, finish. Okay, yay, we've created our first Java project. Okay, so when you create a Maven project in Java, this is the structure you get. And this is a pretty standard structure for a basic Java application. You've got your source directory, and you've got your target directory. So what you're looking at is a folder structure down at the bottom, source and target. At the top half of this is a package structure view. As you can see, there's a little package in the folder. And this is a way of viewing classes more organized by class name, package name situation. Whereas the folder structure is finding things on your disk based on how the folder is laid out. They both access the same code. So, also in the source directory, you're further broken down into main and test. Main will be your main source code, where all your basic, all your real code goes, and test would be where your Java JUnit tests go. Unit tests are great. It's a way of validating that your code works before you deliver it, before you provide it to somebody to actually use. You write unit tests to say, okay, here's my code. So given input A, B, C, I'm expecting output X, Y, Z. So you basically write a test saying, put A, B, C into my program and make sure X, Y, Z comes out of it. If it doesn't, then it fails. Your program is broken. So you go back and you fix your code until the unit test works. That's what a unit test is, and we can get into that in a future class. Main will be where your actual code goes. So let's go ahead and do something in main and maybe see some Java. Enough of this talk. So right mouse click on the source main Java and go new class. Now we give it a name. I'm going to say, demo 1. All right, finish. So I accepted all the defaults, and I can get into all the other fancy stuff about what those options were in there. However, okay, so here's your first class. Congratulations, you've got your first class graded. Package is a category which you could place your code in to identify its use. First of all, the package needs to be reflected in where it's located in the folder structure. So if you're in a package demo, you better be in a folder called demo. Packages can be separated by dots. So you can have dot package 1, but then you would need to put demo 1 into a subfolder under demo called package 1. Does that make sense? All right, good. Package usually starts, the first word can be a general statement of what it's for. Commercial software usually begins with com, C-O-M. Open source software usually starts with org, O-R-G, and things like that. If your code is not in any of those sort of categories, you can just call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine demo. Great. Okay, so next thing you have is public. What is public? Well, that is a visibility identifier. So what do I mean by that? Public says anybody who has this Java file in their library can access demo 1. The other two options you could put here are protected and private. Protected, so if you just say protected, like that, that's a keyword. If that was to say protected, only classes in the same package called package demo could use this class. So protected means nobody outside of the demo package can use this class. The other thing is private. Now, private would be silly, and I don't think you can even do this. Right. Only public, abstract, and final are permitted. You can't do protected or private in a main class declaration. Yeah. That's because you would only do this in a nested class. So protected, demo 2, a nested class. But the first outside initial class should be public. It wouldn't make sense to have it any other way. You wouldn't create a class for nobody to use anyway. So public, and let's not get into the other modifiers like final and things like that. Class, it says this is a class. There are other things you could put here that would be other than a class. Those things could be an interface. They could be an enum. Modifiers of that could be final. Final means nobody could extend this class. What do I mean by extend? We'll get into that in the future too. Also, let's just get into it. The first thing you want to do inside of a class is identify variables. So class variables are basically data elements inside your object. So a class represents an object, and the variables inside of it represent properties of that object. So instead of calling this demo 1, if I were to call this something more intuitive, go to refactor, rename. Let's call this a car. Yeah, that's more interesting. That's too old school. Everyone always does car. Let's do record player. No, call it what it is, a turntable. I love turntables. Okay. Class turntable. So what would a property of a turntable be? And what would you call it? First of all, you need a modifier on these variables. And it's really good practice to keep your class variables private. If you make them public, anybody can change them at any time and you wouldn't even know. Make your variables private. Private. Let's see. Stylus. Ooh, I forgot something. What is a stylus? It could be an object. It could be a string. I wouldn't think it's an int. An int is an integer, which represents a number. It could be a lot of things. I'm going to make it a string because we don't have a whole library of objects to refer to right now. So let's call it a string. Stylus. Private string cartridge. Private string tone arm. Private string ladder. Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with that. So we've got some properties, and I'm using strings because that's a pretty standard data type. A string is a set of text. So what you do is, if you want to create a new turntable, there is something called a constructor to build. A constructor is a function that is called when you create a new instance of this object. A turntable this is a general specification of what a turntable is. An instance of this turntable would be Aaron's turntable in his living room. Okay, so you create an abstract definition of what a turntable is, and then you create an instantiation of that, or many instantiations of turntables for every turntable that exists in the world. So, if I don't create a constructor, there's one created for me by default. Every class extends an implicit object called java-lang object. That's in the package java.lang, and it's called object. So java-lang object is the parent class of your class if you don't extend anything. So this parent-child reference I'm referring to is a way of creating a hierarchy of information in Java, in the programming language. So I can get into inheritance later. Let's just say this is an object and it has an implicit constructor, but I will create one anyway. Turntable. Okay. And I'm not going to put anything in this one. So by default, okay, so this is by default. What happens to your turntable by default? Let's see the stylus. So this is referring to this particular instance. Stylus equals a new one. Okay. I'm making this up as I go. This dot cartridge. Okay. This dot tone arm. Carbon fiber. This dot platter equals, it comes by default with steel. Oh, don't forget your curly braces now. Every function needs to have a curly brace start and a curly brace end. This is what I mean by the value of an IDE is that if tone arm was misspelled, it will be underlined in red. That's very useful. Oh, I see what I did wrong. I had turntable spelled wrong. You see that? Okay. So your constructor does not have a return type because it returns a new instance of the object that you're creating. You could also create another constructor, as many as you want, but they have to have different parameters. So let's say you want to specify the stylus, the cartridge, and the tone arm, and the platter. Let's say you want to specify those when you create it right off the bat. So then this would be setting the variables like this. Okay, so you could create a turntable and I will select what it is for you, or you could specify what you want yourself. Okay, so this is a good example of a turntable. Now say you want to change out these values after you created your turntable. Well, I've made these variable's private, so you can't actually get to this variable outside of the class of turntable. How do you change these values then if you are somebody outside of this class? What you need to do is make public accessor functions. What a public accessor function is a function to set the value and a separate function to get the value. The value of this practice is that you have control over how and when and what happens when these values are changed. So, I mean, however, you can make these public, but that's just a bad practice, and I don't think anybody really does that anymore. So, say you want to have a public accessor for stylus. What would that be like? Well, you'd make it public, and to set the stylus, you would not have to return anything from the function. You would just set it. So I'm going to call it void. Void means nothing's getting returned. And then the practice is lowercase set, capital letter. Okay. Camel case is always the best practice for Java, not underscores. Don't use underscores in Java, unless, of course, you're using constants. Okay. Don't use underscores for variables. Set stylus, string stylus. Okay. This dot stylus equals stylus. That does the same thing as up here, but now this is after the fact. Also, you need, let me type right, public. You need a getter, right? You need to be able to get this value. So public, and you're going to return a string. Get stylus, turn stylus, this dot stylus. You don't have to use this, but I would always use this because you can have a variable. Okay, what's going on here is this is a variable called stylus, but putting this in front of it means the stylus of this object. Okay, the life cycle of this variable without the this in front of it means at the end of this function, it's done. It's gone. It gets picked up by a thing called the garbage collector. The value of stylus will get picked up by the garbage collector unless it's set to a class variable and remembered in memory for a longer period of time. So the accessor method get stylus returns this stylus, and it's always good. If I went stylus, that would still refer to this stylus because there's no other stylus in this function. For ease of understanding what's going on, I'm going to put the word this in front of it. There you go. There's your first public accessor method. And you think this is a lot of work? Well, good news. There is something called generate setters and getters in Eclipse. Go ahead and you can click that. Let's do one for cartridge, platter, and tone arm. And that put that in the wrong location. So I'm going to copy that. Put that down there. There we go. Hey, it just did all that work for me. But now I know, and now you know what that means. What is that doing? And I tried to explain that to you. And I did explain that to you. There. You have made your first class. Congratulations. This is a very simple class. You can refer to this as something called a POJO. What is a POJO? A plain old Java object. See, Java programmers are so creative. A POJO means you've got properties and you've got constructors and then you've got setters and getters and not a whole lot more. Okay, that's what a POJO is. So yeah, I think that's it for the first class. I think we've talked about enough. I think we're going to get into the next one shortly. Stay tuned for that. I will probably make a main function and actually manipulate this class a little bit and do some outputs to the console. So stay tuned for that video. I'll make it shortly. In the meantime, happy coding.